Welcome, everyone, to Smart Sex, Smart Love. We're talking about sex goes beyond the taboo, and talking about love goes beyond the honeymoon. My guest today is Dr. Ronald Hellman, a distinguished life fellow of American Psychiatric Association. Prior to his semi-retirement, he was associate professor of psychiatry in the Icahn School of Medicine at Sinai in New York City. Previously, he was the founder and director of the LGBT Affirmative Program in New York State's largest mental health center. He has published numerous articles and research papers in the areas of sexual identity development, LGBTQ healthcare and programming, and gay male erotic behavior. Dr. Hellman is the recipient of many awards, including the Mental Health Achievement Award of the Gay and Lesbian Psychiatrists of New York, and awards for ethical practice in community psychiatry, distinguished service to the medical profession, diversity awareness, and advancing minority mental health. This year, Ron celebrated 30 wonderful years with his husband. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
Today, he'll be talking about everything you didn't know and always wanted to know about homosexism and sides. Welcome, Ron.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here with you.
It's a pleasure to have you here. So I thought we could start with how we met because, I came up with the term side just very casually with my friends who were talking about topping and bottoming. And then I wrote that article in 2013 on Huffington Post about sides. And then in 2020, Grindr took it on as a sexual position and as a preference. So I put this word out into pop culture. And then you and I somehow got in touch. I think you got in touch with me because you were doing the academic side of this. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, this was 5 years after you introduced the term and it became so widely adapted. And I was totally unaware of the term through all that time. And in the research that I started to do, where I was looking at basically cultural portrayals of what it was thought that gay men did in bed versus what the actual research was showing, I stumbled upon the Huffington Post article, and it was great to see that we were coming from different paths that were coming together, and so it was complete serendipity that I stumbled upon your article. Actually,
I'm so glad you did, because for me, like, my stuff is a little bit more, I guess I could call it pop psych. I mean, it's thoughtful, and I use other people's research in the work to incorporate it. But there is nothing that I know of other than your work academically looking at anything about side or outer course behavior. Am I right about that?
I started it, with this whole idea about homosexism. I'm happy to say that there have been a number of research publications that have subsequently been coming out. And, I know that both you and I are familiar with Angelos Bolis, an academic professor who's at the University of Dublin, who has subsequently published on homosexism based on my original publication. So the concept has been catching on and has really been thought about in some diverse areas that I can talk about a little bit, maybe later or now or whatever.
Oh, definitely now. Talk about it.
Okay. I'll just give you two examples. So after my paper was published, a couple of years later, a publication came out in the academic literature about male rape in the military, which is very underreported, which is somewhat understandable because in the military, masculinity is so associated with dominance, and where this has occurred to some men in the military, just the word rape itself tends to be associated with something that happens to females. And so it has that kind of feminization aspect to it. And homosexism came into the mix in this paper because there's certainly a wider spectrum of erotic, unwanted erotic activities that can take place between men that are bonding in the military. So, there can be erotic horseplay, for example, just grabbing another guy's genitals or something. And the idea with homosexism that many of us are familiar with is that, intercourse is sex. That's the prototype of heterosexual sex, and it's projected onto gay men as anal intercourse, basically. So that's sex. Anything else is often considered foreplay. So oral or manual sex, mutual masturbation, whatever, is not considered sex. So if you're engaged in this kind of horseplay or hazing kind of activities, you're not labeled as homosexual because it's not considered sex.
Yes.
That was one example in a paper that came out. Another was a paper that came out about attractive young men that were starring in Disney productions where there was a fine line between one man saying to another that they found, say, their friend's physique, attractive. That's okay. But that's as far as it goes. Should there have been any sexual innuendo, that is verboten. And, if you think about any kind of drama story that targets young people, there will not be anything related to sexual innuendo between men because of, again, that homosexist prejudice where it's demeaned, denigrated, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So those are two examples.
No, that's helpful. So when you say homosexism, when you say heterosexism, it means, the idea that everything is seen only as heterosexual. In this way, you're talking about a homosexism is everything is gay or homosexuality, but in terms of sexuality, it's just anal intercourse and that's it.
So, I make this distinction between homosexism and homophobia. They're both prejudices, which would be a negative attitude or judgment about a group of people that you project onto them, and so homophobia, is as we know, is widely adapted as kind of anti-gay prejudice. But that functions at the level of sexual orientation, which really has to do with the gender of attraction. You have a same gender attraction. And I'll just give you a couple of examples of that and how it differentiates from homosexism, just from my medical school experience, where, if there were gay medical students in my class, they were in the closet because if it was known that they were gay, back at that time, they would jeopardize their chances of getting into a medical residency program. Same with the doctors. If there were gay doctors, they jeopardized their practices. They wouldn't get referrals from their colleagues. Many people wouldn't even go to them because of that prejudice. So that's functioning just at the level of same gender attraction. It says nothing about what they're doing in bed. So homosexism, and the way I got around to this actually was when I semi-retired, I had more time for myself. And I was watching more movies, TV series, you name it. And that was during an era when gay themes started to really show up in mainstream movies and television. I think the iconic example was Brokeback Mountain. The one explicit scene in that movie is, it stars Heath Ledger and Jake Gyllenhaal, and they've never had sex with each other. They don't discuss sex. They don't use lubricant, nothing. They just go to bed with each other and they have anal intercourse, just like you might see in a heterosexual film. And that's what's depicted. And the more of these kinds of films that I saw, that's all that seemed like it was ever depicted was anal intercourse. But it was not only movies, it was television. There was a series on HBO. I'm just going to look that up for a second. I forget what the title was. Here and Now. There's an explicit sexual scene between two men in that series. What do they have? Anal intercourse. And so I was saying to myself, and this was back around 2018, well, is that really what gay men do in bed? Is that all they do in bed? And I started to research that further, and all throughout various venues in the culture, that's what was conveyed. Go back to even like the story in the Bible of Sodom and Gomorrah, where Lot has these two angels disguised as men in his house, and the men of the community demand that he send them out to them so they could know them. And the only other time that word in Hebrew is used is when Adam knew Eve and she got pregnant. So know means intercourse. Mm-hmm. For these men, it seems that it must mean anal intercourse. So from the Bible to movies to television, books. There was a book entitled the Almanac of what was that one called? The Almanac of Gay and Lesbian America. And in that book, they asked the question, so, what do gay men do in bed? And the answer was the same thing heterosexuals do. Wrong.
Right. Right.
So, it was so pervasive what the cultural portrayal was, anal intercourse. I thought, is this what's really going on? And so now I decided to research the literature. And I was surprised to see that in the academic literature, there was actually over 100 years worth of research on gay male sexuality. And consistently, it showed, even up to, I think one of the most recent studies had over 25,000 subjects, gay men, in their study, that anal intercourse was actually number 3 on the list, that oral and manual sex, mutual masturbation were far more common. And so there's this stereotype that's being promoted within the culture, and this disconnect between what's promoted in the culture versus what the research is actually showing. So I documented all that in an initial publication, academic publication, back in 2018. And it was at that time that I think I stumbled upon, your article in Huffington Post. But then, I thought about it more and tried to figure out, so why does that disconnect exist? And that's when I came up with this prejudice, basically, that I thought was a previously unrecognized prejudice that I called homosexism. Now, homosexism was a word that was actually already around. And to get a little bit of the history of that, I think you have to go back to the work that George Weinberg did. He's the one that coined the term homophobia in a book that came out in 1972, Society and the Healthy Homosexual.
I remember that book.
Yeah. However, that was not the beginning of that story for him. It actually goes back, according to the story, to 1965. He was a heterosexual psychologist, and he was going to a party that was being given by his colleagues, and he was going to be accompanied by a lesbian friend of his, and they disinvited her. And he was really upset about this. But that's really what got the ball rolling for him. He started to think about, why was this? And, he thought it was a fear that they had. It wasn't a fear that she was going to start yelling and screaming at them or physically attacking them or anything like that. The fear was that she could start to upset the apple cart in terms of traditional religious ideas, religious traditions, religious ideas about home and family. Nevertheless, several years later, somebody by the name of Gregory Len, who was a researcher, psychologist at Johns Hopkins University, he was working with John Money, who's considered an icon in terms of the scientific study of sex. He introduced terms such as sexual orientation, gender role. He started the first sexual gender identity clinic for trans people in 1965 there. In any case, Len published a paper about 4 years after George Weinberg's book came out, where he basically made a great argument. He said, well, the prejudice is really not a phobia. It's a prejudice. We really shouldn't call it homophobia. We should call it homosexism. Made a lot of sense.
Okay, yeah.
But the term just never caught on. Homophobia just was it, and it was widely adapted, and it kind of died. So as I was thinking about, this kind of erotic prejudice that was going on, where anything but anal intercourse was being demeaned as basically foreplay, it really wasn't sex. I went back to that term where homo, which means man and same sex, basically, and then sexism, which originally referred to, of course, sexism, having to do with prejudice, particularly around the female gender. Nevertheless, it incorporated the term sex, sexuality. And so I came up with a redefinition of the term and wrote this paper basically suggesting that it could be adapted in this new form as a erotic prejudice, basically.
Do you know in your research, if I could ask, because I've always asked this and I don't know, how do we have stats on how many gay men only are sides or in or outer course? Like you say, it was number 3 or 4 for intercourse in that one survey. How many? What are the percentages?
That largest study, I am not, by any means putting down people that, really love engaging in anal intercourse or take on roles as tops or bottoms or versatile where they switch between the two, whatever. That's great. Very sex positive. This is more about this kind of cultural indoctrination that maintains kind of a heterosexual projection, that intercourse is the prototype for everyone, that, it's just male, female, top, bottom, the penetrator and the penetrated, whatever. The statistics we're talking about anal sex. It's not that different from the percentages of straight men that enjoy anal sex, and they're at some time or another in their lifetimes, maybe, and I'm not recalling the exact figures, but
Yeah.
for gay men that, where that's really their preference, it's probably about a quarter of gay men.
A quarter of gay men who do engage in anal sex
That prefer it.
that
That's what
prefer
they
it.
really prefer it.
Okay.
Um,
Seems so
and
low. I'm just talking with you about this as you're saying this because it seems like in a lot of the sides, we have a Facebook group of 8,800 guys that are all over the world that are sides, and they're always getting picked on these apps from gay men who say, "What's wrong with you? How could you not like that? You're boring. I'm going to block you." All this crap, and it looks like maybe they're the most visible of these gay men that just prefer anal sex and don't want to only have side sex.
I'm telling you, I think we have our own silent majority. More and more, they're coming out erotically out of the closet, so to
Yes.
speak. But I've talked to some of these men that are on, and as the dating hookup websites up until just 2 years ago, those were the only categories they gave you.
Yes.
You could categorize yourself as a top, a bottom, or versatile. That just focused on anal intercourse. And, I've talked to men that said, I put that I was a top, but that's not really what I was into. I'm really a side, but it wasn't a choice. I know you're familiar with that YouTube piece that Michael Henry, the gay comedian, did
Yeah.
called "I'm a Side," and that piece. If you look at the comment, over 1,300 comments from that piece, where people just express how relieved they were to finally see themselves represented in terms of their erotic predilections, and many of them talk about how it was the same thing that a lot of us went through in terms of just our gay or sexual orientation, where if you only met the right woman, and here it's like if you only met the right man, you would just love anal intercourse, right? And
Heard that my whole life.
they would think that there was something wrong with them.
Yes.
So it can really affect one's self-esteem,
Yeah, I can't believe, honestly, still can't believe that one word that I came up with, I think I told you this, we were talking about top and bottom, and I'm like, why can't I be a side? I was just thinking about a box. And we all laughed, and I thought, well, why is that even funny? Why can't that actually be the word? Never, ever dreaming that it would catch on like this. And when I go around the country and, I'm vacationing or on business, and I get on Grindr and I get on Scruff and I look up sides. I just want to see. There are so many. And I love that people are starting to say, I only want to have side sex. Like some people are like, I only want to have side sex until I have a partner. Then I'll maybe engage in intercourse. I just like the use of the word because nobody knows outer course. And they're not going to use that word. That word is so formal, right? Side isn't.
Exactly. It's one syllable. It just slips right out. And it was brilliant on your part. I mean, I imagine you had no idea,
None.
But boy, were we ripe for the term. It's almost like in the same way that, we're all familiar now with the term cisgender, which didn't exist forever. We kind of knew about trans and transgender, but what was kind of the kind of correlation to that, and all of a sudden they're cisgender, heterosexual, homosexual, cisgender, transgender, top, bottom, side, kind of has rounded out just the whole idea of sexuality. It's not a surprise that it became so commonly adopted.
And your work is so valuable to me. I wanted to somehow infiltrate the work that I've done in the popular culture, because people want to understand it in terms of stats, in terms of research, in terms of academic way of thinking, and that's why I wanted you on the show. What would you say is the theme of the work you're doing? Trying to take the prejudice out of the erotic in this way?
Absolutely. You know, I think just the fact that we have this popularized term that you came up with just segs so well into more of this kind of formal research and a scientific approach to it. Science is about truth. It's not about ideology, and that's what the culture is giving us, is this ideology. And we're seeing it politically now, where there's just man and woman and intercourse and traditional families, and that's it. And even outlawing now in Florida, for example, it's against the law to discuss sexual orientation to the first 3 grades.
Right.
And there are even states now that have made it's another issue. Medicaid, it's illegal to use Medicaid to cover trans interventions in adults. Nothing to do with what we're doing with kids. It sustains this kind of traditional kind of sense that, again, has its kind of political overtones as well, to maintain a traditional conservative idea.
Yeah. What my hope would be, and is that the term catch on in the L community, and the T community, and the B community, and the straight community. And I talk about this because in my book on Side Guys, I wrote, I put a story in of a black trans woman approached me with, she was upset with me, and she said, I want to know why you created a term only for gay men, because I consider myself a side too. She was trans. And I looked at her, I said, look at me. I'm white, I'm male, I'm gay, and I'm cisgender. Can you imagine, in this cancel culture and this, the fact that everyone's infighting, if I had created a word for your community or anybody else's community outside of mine, I would have been eaten alive. I stayed far away from that. And she softened and she said, you're right. I'm sorry I said that. You're right. And I am right.
So I have to tell you, in when I was researching that first paper and looking for data in terms of how sex is portrayed in movies and TV and whatever, the one incident of explicit sex that involved mutual masturbation, I found one incident of it was between 2 women.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
That's a whole other podcast. I've always thought we could learn so much, and we have learned so much about sex from lesbians, where they, have all kinds of outer cores and they'll only have intercourse. So that's a whole other podcast, I think.
Yeah. And so I think, I'm hoping as this continues to develop, that people will have an appreciation of the deep intimacy that men that are not into intercourse experience with each other. Yeah. It is not something to just just wave away as foreplay.
No.
It's not that at all for these men.
So Ron, can you, before we go, we have a few more minutes. What would you like people to know about you that we didn't discuss, like in a real abbreviated way? What is something else about that we didn't cover?
Number one, given all the media portrayals that we've just talked about, that we are still not holding the media accountable for accurate portrayals of sexuality among men who have sex with men. number one. Number two, there's no education about this. And so, where are gay men getting their education? Probably most of them are getting it from sexually explicit websites, porn sites. And those sites as well tend to emphasize anal intercourse. You will find everything there, but I think you'll see more of that than just about anything else. And so, we're not holding these websites accountable. And I've also seen in so many different ways. Urology departments. Yeah. Urology is about, urogenital issues in men, and they will routinely administer a sexual function questionnaire to men. The commonest one is called the SHIMS, the Sexual Inventory for Men, something like that. Mm-hmm. And I'm telling you, it is an outdated, biased inventory that focuses on intercourse.
Yeah.
And, it does a disservice not only to gay men, but to straight men that,
who don't.
So many, are older. They may not have a partner anymore. If they had a partner, they may never have really preferred intercourse. And so you have to lie on these questionnaires in order to answer these questions. So that's another area.
Oh, go ahead. We'll probably have to stop because of time. There's so much here. Maybe we'll do a part 2 because it's so important to me that this message get out there and that people hear your work. And how can they find you? So let's say somebody's been listening and they want to know where to find Ron Hellman.
At my email, it's my first and last name with my middle initial in there, Ronald E. Hellman @gmail.com. And that's where they can reach me. They can keep their eye out for a book that's coming out with Rutgers University Press in 2025. And that's on a different subject. Right now, the title of the book is Loving Arrangements, and that is going to be talking about open relationships. Mm-hmm. And, so that's a bit of a different subject. But otherwise, people can reach me at my email address.
All right, great. Thank you so much for being on my show. It's so interesting. We might do a part 2 because there's so much more to say. You can hear more of my podcast, Smart Sex, Smart Love, by following me at Twitter, on TikTok, on Instagram, and Facebook. And my handle is at Dr. Joe Kort, DrJoeKort. You can also go to smartsexsmartlove.com. And you can go to my website, joekort.com. So everyone, thank you so much for listening. Until next time, stay safe and stay healthy.